Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're watching this YouTube channel from. My name is Godfrey Chaze, and I'm here to welcome you again to Homeline Academy. This is our YouTube channel where we talk about everything education. And in these first episodes, we have chosen to start with this idea of home education, which others call homeschooling. In our first episode, you remember we defined what homeschooling is. And in the second episode, we talked about why people choose to homeschool. I hope you like those videos if you watched them. And I want to encourage you to subscribe, to click on that subscribe button, please, and share this video so that many people can join us in the conversation about education in general. Education that can bring transformation to our society. In today's episode, which should be episode number 3, I want to talk about the 3 pillars, so to speak, of homeschooling. You remember in episode 1 where we defined what homeschooling is, we said homeschooling can be defined on the parameter of 3 pillars. One was it should be home-based, it should be parent-led, and it should be private. I want to substantiate on each one of these 3. Why home-based, why parent-led, and why should it be private? So, to begin with is home-based education. What do we mean by home-based? Home-based as opposed to what? Home-based as opposed to institutionalized. We know mostly today, we understand education in the area that it is institutionalized. It is the institutionalized type where a child leaves the home, they go out to an institution somewhere, to a school somewhere, where there are 4 walls of a classroom where they are going to teach, and there is this somebody who is considered to be professional, who stands before them, and they think that's the only place where teaching and learning takes place. But home-based education is different. It is home-based in the sense that it is at home. But even being at home does not necessarily mean that the child is in the house 24/7. But why should it be home-based? Number one, like we alluded to it last time, is that this is almost our traditional or African traditional education system. It's not in any way new. This is how education has been almost everywhere in the world since time immemorial. It has been the kind that is home-based, where parents are recognized by society at large as educators, in that a child, to become what they are supposed to become in any society, they acquire it from their parents. The parents take on that role as educators, best from their home, a home as the primary place where they best from to go wherever they go. It does not mean that they only learn when they are in the house at home, but a home is a place where they are as a family. They could be in the house, they could be on the farm, they could be walking by the way, they could be traveling, they could be in the car, they could be in the garden, they could be visiting neighbors or visiting friends. In all those places, there are so many teachable moments that parents must just simply become deliberate about and ensure that those teachable moments are seized and ensure that learning takes place. But to clarify as to why home-based education is important, even in this day and age, for us to come back to, is that it will help us to clarify, especially in matters of advocacy, especially for things like homeschooling, where we are simply trying to advocate for it as an alternative that could be recognized in our setup. Now, if we are to achieve that goal of advocating for home-based education, we need to clarify this as home-based, because anything else other than home-based, the institutionalized type, the school type of education where a child wakes up in the morning, they go to a school, it's already provided for in the laws. There is no need to advocate for that at all. I mean, every school, whether it's a public school or a private school in this country, somewhere our Education Act of 2008 and our Constitution clearly stipulates and defines it and clarifies what it is and what it should be like. But this home-based education is different. The one where parents are in charge, the one which is happening in the home environment of where the child is coming from, is different. That's not provided for in the law. And if we keep mixing them, calling what are actually private, because they are small private schools and we call them homeschools, we are mixing the matter, and it will confuse the policymakers to whether this is something they've already regulated in the law or is something that requires a new law. So the home-based education we are talking about is the kind where it's not in an institution somewhere. It is based at home and it's not provided for yet in the law. And number two, why home-based education? Home-based education in the sense that a home should be recognized once again as an educational institution, because it has always been. I mean, we all know sayings like charity begins at home. What do we mean by charity? That's education. That's the character that forms a person begins at home. How is it passed on to the person so that it becomes a part of their identity? It's from the home. So if charity begins at home, we must recognize, it's time we recognize that a home is an education institution, just like the other places where we go thinking that that's where we can find education. Number three, I can say, why home-based education? From the definition of what education is. I have a friend of mine, I call him a friend of mine, Noah Webster. Noah Webster is said to be the father of American education. One of the monumental things he left behind was a dictionary, the Webster Dictionary, Webster 1828. If you go to this dictionary, I recommend it. I like it so much, the way he defines the terminologies he defines in it. He defines education as to bring up, just as of a child. Formation of manners. Do you hear those three phrases? Education has to do with bringing up just the way you bring up a child. Education has to do with formation of manners in the child and fit this child for usefulness in their future station. That's Webster. When he's defining education, he's looking at that whole process of bringing and nurturing a child to make them become the adult they are supposed to become, who are fit for whichever station they were meant to fit into. Now, when you listen to that kind of definition, where should such a thing start from? Where should it be done from? I mean, where do we nurture children from? Where are children brought up from if it's not in the home? So you see it right there, that defining education in its proper sense alludes to the fact that it is a factor that happens in a home environment, And lastly, on why home-based education, I would say there is a difference between education and schooling. And it's possible for someone to be schooled, but they are not educated. Home-based education emphasizes the aspect of educating vis-a-vis the aspect of schooling. Schooling, if you think about it, in a way, it is a new invention. It is something that was never used in reference to human beings. Actually, if you read dictionaries of old, when they are defining the word school, it's never in reference to humans or to children, but to things like fish. It used to be a school of fish, a school of animals. But human beings are not beings that should be schooled. To be schooled, I want you to think about a fish pond. If you've been to a fish pond and you see these little fishlings, when they are all swinging from one side to another, they go in the same direction at the same time, as if they have a command within them that commands them to move in those different directions. I think that's what schooling does to kids by making them uniform. Cookie cut them. They make them like cookie cutters, where they look similar in everything, they think similar, they act similar, they do everything the same way. That's not true of human beings. Even for someone who has identical twins, you will recognize that those children are different. They are unique in various ways. And so a system that is going to make them similar, it is kind of going to force them to be what they are not supposed to be naturally. And that's why we must be careful about schooling vis-a-vis education. So the goal of home education, the goal of home-based education, is to ensure that education takes place other than schooling. And it's the same even when it comes to all compulsory education laws in all of the countries where they are. For us here in Uganda, basic education is compulsory. Yes, but it is basic education, not basic schooling. So what is compulsory, what everybody needs, every child needs, is education, not necessarily schooling. That's key for us to take note of, that there is a difference between schooling and education. And that's why we define homeschooling as home-based. Number two, I defined homeschooling as parent-led. Why parent-led? And parent-led as opposed to what? Home education or homeschooling is parent-led as opposed to being a professionally trained teacher-led. Why is this so? Nature itself grants it to parents to educate their offsprings. This is true of anything, of every living thing. It educates its offsprings because the purpose of offsprings or children or younglings coming into this world is so they are nurtured to become like the adult before whom they are being nurtured. And the process that makes sure that that happens is education, basically. We can call it parenting. In other words, parenting and education are synonymous. You may ask, do you mean there's no place for a teacher, a trained teacher in education? No. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually going to do in another episode where we are going to talk about professionally trained teacher. What is their place? Can parents who are not necessarily professionally trained teachers educate children? We are going to talk about that, but that should take a video of its own. But nature here, I want to emphasize that nature grants it to parent. Whichever parent it is, whether it's an animal parent, whether it's birds or even chickens in your compound, they somehow educate their offsprings. So it is within the DNA of whatever it is that we call parent to educate its offspring. It just happens or kind of organically. Again, why parent-led education? Education, studies show it that true learning takes place in a place where there is sort of a natural love bond between the person of a teacher and the person of a learner, where there is that kind of relationship where the learner trusts and believes that the one who is teaching them really loves them, genuinely loves them. That's the place where learning is going to take place maximally. And there's nothing that can beat that bond between a parent and their child. You can't compare that to a professionally trained teacher to the child. So where there is that natural bond between the person of a parent as the teacher in this case and the person of a learner, in this case being the child of that parent, that's the place where education can be maximized. The other thing we can say why parent-led education is that teaching and learning requires a deeper understanding of the person who is being taught. Now look at it. Who really understands your child better than you as a parent? Who will understand anybody better than their dad or their mom or their guardian, whoever it is that is standing in the place of their parent? So when we are teaching these children, there is so much that is at play. There is so much that is going on that requires a deeper understanding of this child to help them learn. And nothing, again, beats the kind of relationship the parent has to their child. But also we can talk about the teacher-student ratio. Studies are clear that education is best, learning is best or happens better in a place where the ratio between the teacher and the learners is limited. Let's say 1:1 is the best of all. 1:2 is better. 1:3, 1:4. But in a school environment, let's face it, 1:50, 1:70, 1:100, sometimes even more than 100, so much is at stake there. So we need to encourage and support parent-led education under homeschooling or home education, because the ratio between the teacher and the learner is the kind that indeed supports and encourages teaching and learning to take place. Lastly, on this aspect of why parent-led education, I want to say, studies have been done, and there is science itself stands on this side, on our side, that when it comes to teaching a child for them to be able to learn, whether the parent is not necessarily a trained educator, There is no such science that shows that for learning to take place, the person of a teacher must have a degree, a certificate in something, or a PhD or a master's. There is no significant difference whatsoever, according to the studies that have been done, that shows that children who are educated by non-trained teachers are not able to ensure that learning takes place. Neither is it saying that those who are trained by professionally trained teachers are far better. Such studies are not yet there. So as such, teaching and learning is an art that anybody can learn, and anyone can be able to actually facilitate and help the person of a learner to actually learn. So it is these three pillars that I've talked about when we are defining homeschooling. It is home-based, it is parent-led, and lastly, I said it should be private. Private in the sense that it should be opposed to state-run education, government-run education. And why is this an issue? It's an issue that if we are talking of home-based education, we are not trying to invite the government to come and begin all of a sudden to run our homes, to run how we do things in our houses, to run how we do things in our families. Families inherently are recognized as private places where we do a number of things. Of course, there could be those who are concerned. How sure are we going to be that what is going on in that home is something that is legitimate, is something that is legal? I think as it is in all other things, is it the government responsibility to make sure that people at their home sleep the rightful amount of time, or they eat the right kind of food, or they treat their children, or they treat their spouses the way they are supposed to treat them? We need not to burden our government to do things that actually are our own responsibility. So home-based parent-led education is the kind that should be private. This will actually reduce the burden on the state to supervise and inspect things which are not necessary. Of course, there could be concerns of things which can cross the borders and go into what we could categorize as criminal. Anything that is criminal must be already defined in the laws of the land. And once it is criminality, there are already laws that should be able to take care of that. We shouldn't reinvent the wheel. We shouldn't reinvent and come up with other laws. In other words, homeschooling. What is homeschooling? It is home-based, parent-led, and private in the sense that I've explained today. If you like this video or this series of teachings that we are sharing on our YouTube channel, please subscribe and share it with others. My name is Godfrey Chaze, and the channel once again is Homeline Academy.